Greetings, I'm Michael O'Connor, and thank you for joining me at the well. Today we have with us Mickie Prault. Mickie, it's great to have you here.
Good to be here.
Mickie, we're going to be dealing with a difficult question today. And the question is, why does God let good people suffer? Why does God let anyone suffer? Bishop Barron, Robert Barron was asked the question, what's the number one reason why people don't believe in God? And his answer is because they can't understand why God lets people suffer. And it's something that's we all struggle with. I think if you're honest with yourself, we all struggle with that. But what I wanted to share today is a really good video clip from Chris Stefanick, who deals with this topic. So I'd like to play it, and then we can sit down and discuss, what he said and what really impacted us. Fair enough?
Sure.
Okay, great. Let's hear from Chris.
Everybody has to suffer in life. Nobody gets a free pass on that one. And you know what? For a lot of people, that's the greatest obstacle they have to faith. If there's really a God, why does he let us suffer? Maybe he's not there. Maybe he just doesn't care. Now, sometimes our suffering is caused by other people's selfishness or by our own bad choices. And we have this capacity for love. That also means that the opposite extreme is a possibility too. We have the ability to kill each other. We have the ability to abandon each other. I mean, we don't want to blame God for everything. I mean, like, God, if you're really there, why are children starving in Haiti? And I think God's looking down from heaven saying, I was about to ask you that question. Sometimes our suffering is not caused by our bad choices. Sometimes our suffering is just caused by the fact that we have to deal with the frailty of our human condition. We're not living in the Garden of Eden anymore. We have to deal with death. We got to deal with things like cancer. We got to deal with things like tsunamis that claim 10,000 lives. And what then? A lot of times that kind of experience is what brings about not just that intellectual problem with faith, but that gut-wrenching question, why? God, are you really there? I think of Lazarus' sister Mary in Scripture. After Lazarus died, she ran up to Jesus and said, Lord, if you were here, this wouldn't have happened. Now, there's good theological explanations for why a God of love would let us suffer. He doesn't cause us to suffer, but he lets us suffer, but only with a plan to bring about some greater good. Even if that's a good that we only see from the perspective of eternity. See, God's the author of life, and he knows how the story ends. And if he ties the whole story together, man, a good ending redeems every up and down and twist and turn that happens in every chapter along the way. The ultimate example of God letting bad things happen to bring about some greater good is the death of his son. He let Jesus die on a cross. That's not because he abandoned mankind. Christians call the day that Jesus died Good Friday, even though it's the worst evil imaginable. The killing of God in the flesh. Yet we call it Good Friday because it's the source of the greatest blessing we can imagine, Easter Sunday, and our victory over sin and death and despair. It's because of Good Friday that we know that the grave doesn't get the final word. But you know what? All those theological explanations, they only go so far. When you're experiencing profound suffering, you're not necessarily going to be thinking, well, Chris said God writes the story from beginning to end, sees the whole thing, big picture, blah, blah, blah. No. Sometimes when you're in intense pain, that's all you could see. You know what helps me at a time like that? I look to the cross. See, the central image of Christianity is not a guy saying, hey, come follow me, and everything's going to be easy all the time. Even if you don't believe in God, the cross says one thing really clearly. Life is really difficult sometimes. But as a Christian, I can never look at my God and say, you don't know what this is like to deal with pain, to deal with suffering, to watch your body fall to pieces in front of you, to have people who are supposed to be there for you all take off. Because he does. See, Jesus never promised us freedom from suffering. What he promises us is his presence with us in our suffering. What he promised us is that because we can unite our suffering with his on the cross and offer up to God for the salvation of the world, is that pain can have a purpose. What he promised us is the hope of Easter Sunday, and that death doesn't have the final word. What he promised us is an example of heroic love in the middle of our suffering. See, he didn't suffer so we wouldn't have to. He suffered so we'd know how to. So even when you're in those darkest moments of life, where you want to just cry out, God, where are you? You know where he is? He's on the cross right next to you, saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? So you never have to say those words alone.
It's a great video from Chris. Mickie, what's some of the things that struck you with what he said?
Well, I was, as I watched him, and he ended up, and he talked about whenever he suffers, he just looks at Christ on the cross, and it just sort of popped into my head as well. The cross becomes the tree of life, and our suffering really is maybe to look at it more as a beginning of our life than necessarily an end or a problem in our life. I think it's so important that we trust God, that what he's doing is what's really going to be best for us, and that the good will always result from whatever happens to us.
I think a lot of people feel like God has abandoned them when they're suffering. And, think about when you suffer and you turn to your parents. When you're small, you want your mother and father next to you. And you don't blame your mother or father for how you feel. You're willing to accept their love, and that presence makes you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I took away from this is, rather than shun God because we're suffering, I think we need to understand that he's there present for you, and to be able to take comfort in that. And the worst thing you'd want to do is tell your parents to leave the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why not just say, I need you more than ever now? And believe me, you don't think he understands your suffering? As Mickie was saying, I don't think there's anyone who suffered more. Just look at the cross and what's happened there. There are some things, sufferings caused by evil things in this world. I like what he said at the very beginning. He said, why are there starving people in Haiti? He goes, I'm about to ask you that question. What are you doing about it, right? So, God gave us the 10 Commandments. He gave us his preachings, so many things. He said, here is how to live. And if you're boiled down in one word, it's love. So just think about all the evil things in the world that happen to people. If love might be a cure, would people hurt each other? You think about the Middle East, where it's an eye for an eye versus Christ turn the other cheek. If you live the life of love, maybe some of that suffering goes away. He's giving us a model on how to live.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important to keep in mind. Mm-hmm. Anything else kind of hit you at all in what he said there?
I read or heard somewhere where this person likens suffering to, if you were on a train and you entered into a long tunnel, and you couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you wouldn't get off the train in the middle of the tunnel and give up your ticket. You would certainly stay on the train and trust that the train was going to take you where you needed to be. And I think the suffering that we're given is really, I think it's pretty like that, right? I'm suffering. I don't want to give up on my hope in the middle of the trip. So that was.
Yeah, it's a good story. Another thing that I don't think this is an answer to those people who are suffering, but I know, as a matter of fact, for me, that suffering does teach you things, and sometimes going through hard times actually and puts you in a better place in some situations. I'm not saying all situations, but sometimes pain is a part of learning and understanding, and I find that helpful. And finally, one thing he said that I liked is that death does not have the final word. So what's the worst that can happen with suffering? It would be death. But it does not have the final word. You think about all the suffering Christ did on the cross, and it was followed by Easter Sunday and the resurrection, and saying, if you want to look forward, if you want to look at that light at the end of the tunnel, really, death does not have the final word. He's there for us to get us through that suffering. And yes, bad things are going to happen. We might lose a child. It's kind of hard to deal with that. Absolutely. But just to remember, death does not have the final word. Any final comments, Mickie?
Just hang on, right? It's all about hanging on and trusting that at the end, it's going to be good.
And know that you got a partner in your suffering. That's the most important. He's with you every step of the way. Mickie, thanks for joining me today.
You bet. Thank you.
It's a tough topic, but I think we got through it. Take care. Keep listening, keep praying, and God bless.
Thank you.